So it looks like many Bond fans' worst nightmare is actually coming true. Of course, we already have a nightmare in the fact that Amazon has control over the James Bond property now. And as that deal is finalized, it's going to get even worse. I don't know what to tell you, folks, but here we go. So before we get started, it's important for me to say that I'm trying to get to 100K. Many of you already know this, but have you double checked to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel? Just go down there, and if it's your first time or your thousandth, just click the subscribe button. It's absolutely free. And then turn all the notifications on with the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything that I do. 1, 2, 3 videos a day at times. Sometimes I'll do an additional live stream. You never know, but you don't want to miss it because normally I'm talking about important stuff. For example, like today with James Bond. Get to it. Growing up, I was very excited as a Bond fan. I was seeing these films probably a little bit earlier than I should have because of my age. It had a lot of risque things in it, but at a younger age, sometimes that stuff just goes right over your head. You don't pay attention. The innuendo is subtle enough that it's playing on multiple levels. And in the case of James Bond, I was fascinated by all of the tradecraft and the amazing gadgets and things that James Bond had. And I'm sure many of you also were fascinated with that as well. Even into adulthood and into the novels and all of the books that I picked up because of James Bond that weren't James had elements in it that just absolutely helped develop my imagination, and probably yours also. And generation after generation, this went on and on, kind of like with the Disney company, only for spies. And I have to tell you, James Bond is one of those things that I think most people share a common bond on, because it's a little bit a part of American culture, despite being incredibly British. And it was a wide appeal franchise, something that other television programs and films came along to try to emulate later on, from The Bourne Identity to any number of spy thrillers that have come on ever since. And in a lot of ways, having 50 years of Bond, well, made sense as well. You were going to have a character that could be recast, and redeveloped multiple times, as long as the characteristics of the character didn't change. And it stayed that way for a long time, including when it was passed along to stewards, such as Barbara Broccoli and Mr. Wilson. And those two folks did a great job for a while until we got into the Daniel Craig era, and they listened to the many voices that were trying to get them to change. The problem is, you don't change Bond, you just put him in a situation where his character works. That's how you do it, whether you have to change the time period that you're operating in, or you just change the world around Bond, because after all, it's a movie. So looking at that information and looking at all the many things that have come and gone in the Daniel Craig era, we recognize that the character wasn't quite the same, and he was taking his cues from Jason Bourne, which made absolutely no sense. So with the death of James Bond, and in fact with the death of Daniel Craig's James Bond, you had an opportunity to start with a fresh slate and recraft Bond into something that maybe was in an earlier time frame. Go back to the original literature and work from there. There's plenty of room to do it, and even though you wasted some of the good storylines and some of the good elements on Daniel Craig from early on, I think you could probably still pull it off. But now that Amazon has full control of Bond, or will very shortly, we end up with probably some of the worst news ever. And no, it's not Jennifer Salke taking over, as much as that would be detrimental to anything, any story, especially with a heavy masculine character, because when you put somebody like her in charge of something, she Kathleen Kennedy's it, which means it's automatically feminized and destroyed in favor of women. And look, I mean, there are a lot of ladies' properties out there that are mass appealing. You could even create a female James Bond type character if you wanted to, but you can't feminize James Bond. And no matter how hard Daniel Craig tried. Yet here we are with not Miss Salke, but another Kathleen Kennedy woman. I'm of course talking about Amy Pascal. That's right. According to Variety, Amy Pascal and David Heyman are eyed to run James Bond franchise for Amazon MGM Studios. I don't think this is going to work out well, do you? And it's not going to be because of David Heyman. He's had a lot of success from obviously the Harry Potter days into the not so great version of Harry Potter days in the Fantastic Beasts franchise, which diminishing returns is, well, it's the personification of. Amy Pascal, on the other hand, is a failed studio head, somebody who literally blew up Sony from the inside out, and during an email hack in 2014-2015, basically exposed the inside of Hollywood and how Hollywood studios work, at least with her in charge, and the falling out that the studio had with major actors and actresses. Amy Pascal is not a positive force anywhere, and there's a decent chance that she's not always in her right mind. And you can read in between the lines for that one. But hearing that Amazon was going to take on these two as the leaders of this particular franchise stunned me in my tracks. I was not quite prepared for this, and while Heyman's been able to recover from Fantastic Beasts with many other things, and in addition to being just really good at picking movies like Barbie and things like that, he has a solid track record as a producer. He's never had things handed to him, like Amy Pascal with Spider-Man. And if Amy Pascal had been treated properly, like any other executive, to do what she did, she would have been fired with no opportunities for any kind of production credit, which, again, is the only reason she does anything with Sony, or the reason that she's even affiliated with Spider-Man, because by all accounts, she should have been neither. And yet, here we are with the pair being described as being in talks, because they can't sign a deal right now, which means they're going to sign a deal in the near future as soon as Amazon finalizes its pact to buy the creative control from Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. Variety is far too kind with Amy Pascal, because they say that she left her job in 2015. No, she was forced out, and it was supposed to be brutal. She got cut a little bit of slack at the end from her co-CEO, which she absolutely didn't deserve. And trying to light her up, saying she's responsible for the successes in the Spider-Man franchise? Please. It succeeds despite her, and in fact would be in rough shape if it weren't ultimately led by Kevin Feige and his decision-making process surrounding Spider-Man. Also, hysterically, Variety calls Challengers a critical hit, which was a complete disaster. Since the acquisition of MGM, Amazon has been licking its chops over Bond, but nothing has been happening because Barbara Broccoli and Mr. Wilson could not agree with the direction that Amazon wanted to take Bond. And because they literally control the property itself, well, they would have to sell it in order for Amazon to do what they wanted. Well, the problem is they did sell it, and it looks like Amazon's going to do what they want, and we're going to get it completely destroyed. At least that's how I see it. But what about you? It's audience participation time. Let me know what you think is going to happen with Bond now that Amazon has managed to shed the people who have creative control of the property. Do you think that Amy Pascal was a good choice, or will be a good choice as somebody leading this franchise into the future? I mean, aside from David Heyman, I can't imagine how including Amy Pascal would be an upside. Can you? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And if you wouldn't mind, let me know if you think this is going to turn out okay. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya. Real.